Hello, everybody. I'm the Shark Daymond John, and today we're talking business. Welcome to Entrepreneur Conversation. I am the Shark Daymond John, and I have the pleasure today to be speaking to Adrienne and Rana of Pound Cake Society and Everyday Ritual. How are you?
Thank you. How are you?
I am amazing. I'm amazing. Thank you for being here with me. Now, I know a little bit about your history, but and I found you fascinating that, you know, fashion is your love and your passion. Obviously, it's mine as well. And I know that you had a showroom at one point and you decided to shut that down and you know, pursue what I think is harder than any other career, which is stay-at-home parenting. So shout out to moms and dads, but shout out to moms. So why don't you tell me a little bit about Pound Cake Society and Everyday Ritual? Where were you prior to the pandemic? Where are you now? And then let's get into some questions that hopefully I can answer and you can learn from me, and hopefully I can learn from you at the same time.
Pound Cake Society came about because my longtime friend and now business partner, Rana, and I, when I moved back to Los Angeles from Connecticut, she was waiting. Oh, so years and years ago, we both work in fashion. We both studied science in college. And I had a showroom and she was manufacturing, and we got together to create a really beautiful line of skirts called Polly Says, and we had major success with it. And then around 2006, you know, did the whole family thing, but we kept in touch. Yeah. So when I said, oh, we're moving back to California, she's like, what do you want to do? And I'm like, I'm studying medicine now. What do you want to do? And I was like, let me see. And I said, sleepwear.
Because it's easy. It doesn't go out of fashion. You can stock pajamas. It's not like it's going to go out of style the next year. So there's no danger in having merchandise around.
But it's mostly something really nice and pretty for you, your everyday ritual.
You went through a very challenging time, and then all of a sudden you open back up and boom, COVID hits.
We started the business in 2019, but 2020 was our first official sale. We had our first sale with Nordstrom, $30,000. We hit the jackpot. We were ready to go. It's supposed to be delivered in April. And COVID. You know, COVID was happening. All of our wheels were turning. We didn't know how bad it was. I'm trying to get, you know, you could see it coming in the tea leaves. Schools are going to be closed. What am I going to do with my child? My husband will be home now all the time. Mm-hmm. And, you know, how does that work?
Fabric was not coming from China because China closed down, but we had local fabric.
We had a little bit
that we were ready to make pajamas out of. So we cut them into masks. Instead of making pajamas, we took that same pamphlet and boom, we started making masks.
Rana came to me and she said, you know, we've gotten a couple of requests, just random requests for masks. Government, who manufactures, who does this, who does that. Mm-hmm. She's like, I'm thinking we would try to make some masks. And so with her background in geophysics, went out and really put together a good mousetrap. Like, it's a really good mask.
So we ordered a few thousand yards of that, cut them up into masks, cut up our pajamas, made a bunch of masks.
Where we are today is we are manufacturing masks at around 100,000 a month.
At least.
And we supply a lot of masks to major corporations.
How did you get to have these major outlets come to you?
So you know, our comfort zone, our business model was business to wholesale, business to business. And when we sold the 40,000 masks to the individual members of our society, that was a challenge. It was new for all of us. I found my comfort zone to be in business to business. So we started sending out feelers and went with people we knew that worked for companies that we knew and said, hey, we've got this mask. If you guys are trying to get back to work, let's see if this works for you.
The easiest thing to sell is the truth. And if you put that kind of quality and that kind of effort into it, obviously product is king in any business, right? But next, I think the people can learn from you is that just pick up the phone. Yeah. You don't have to hire all these fancy salespeople and this. Pick up the phone. Nobody will sell your company or your product or your love better than you will. So what is the question that you may have for me? How can I hopefully give you some insight?
I think the first question is just basically about cash flow, loans versus investors. how do we get to the next level? We have the business, but the investments are now really outweighing what we've been able to cover personally. Correct?
Yes.
Yeah, and we also want to pay ourselves. We pay,
And you haven't
we pay
been
everyone
paying
else. We don't
yourself.
pay ourselves yet. Not yet.
You haven't been paying yourself. Okay, so as you grow the business, you're going to have to find some level of a strategic investor, but the sooner you take in money, the more it costs. And we have to look at the business now. If you have not paid yourself, and I think you said you have, is that $1 million in orders? How much cash do you need to be invested in the company?
Probably use $1 million.
About $1 million.
Okay, so you are selling right now strictly B2B, or are you selling B2C?
We're doing both B2B and B2C.
What percentage of the business is B2B and what percentage is B2C?
B2B is, I'd say, 95% of the business, and B2C is 5%.
Here are a couple of ways to think about it. When you're dealing with the stores you're dealing with the top chains in the world, and that's great because they can highlight you and put you on a great stage. You have the consumer in there with the disposable income. When you get in orders from them, have you ever looked into factoring?
We have looked into factoring. Mostly we have not done factoring because it's been for the masks where we get these ginormous orders for $300,000, and the margin on that, we were trying to keep as much of it to ourselves, and because we managed to actually finance up to now on our own those kind of orders, but we keep getting more orders, and that's where we're like, oh, I don't think we can keep going with our own money going forward.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. Factoring, I'm not sure the rates today in factoring. I find that to be a little bit better. I'll tell you why. And for those who do not know what factoring is, you have credit worthy stores. They place an order, let's say for $1 million, and factoring, a financial institution gives you an advance on that, but they put a VIG on the amount of it. However, they don't take any of your company, which is the important part. You get to grow the company. And, you know, as you gain more credit with the factors, you know, you can get 5, 10, 20 million, because what if you took in $1 million now and somebody wanted to take 25% of the company or 20% of the company? Well, then it doesn't look like you women are slowing down when you have $10 million in orders and you need to raise another 3. Well, I'm not giving up the 25% that I have. Why should I? And then you end up working for the investors. Slow and steady growth is important. However, the margin is the most important thing. You know, how much are you traditionally making? What is your number one seller? How much do you make that unit for? And how much do you sell it to the retailer at?
We're working off of a 60% margin. So 2.6 is where we're going with the retailer. And then that's because we know what their margins need to be. So we cover ourselves.
Your margin is healthy. That means there's some other place, there's some other leakage going on. Because if you look at, as you break down, you know, your margins, it should be 50% is here. Then you have payroll, you have advertising, marketing. Advertising, marketing should be 5%. Payroll and everything else should really all come to probably about 30%, and you could, you know, profit, or probably about 20%, 50% for cost of goods, 30% for everything else, and then 20% goes into your pocket. There are some places that you are over-indexing in that I don't happen to know where. Maybe you have too many people on payroll, maybe rent, warehousing, something else.
No, it goes in, let's say when we have the mask order for a couple $100,000, that needs to be financed, that we have to buy the fabric, we have to pay for the labor on that. And what happens is we have the contract that we have with our big client says that they need to put 50% down, and then 45 days after we ship, they do the other 50%. That has not happened. They have consistently not put in the 50% deposit, which we were hoping to get so we can finance those orders for 100,000, 500,000, 300,000. So the money coming in from the clothing, which is about a third of the business, really 2/3 is from the masks, goes into financing production of the mask. And then when we ship, we have not received the 50%, even though we've gotten, which we could use your advice on how to deal with that really. And they go past the 45 days. We struggle to get paid from them.
A lot of
on
it,
time.
Yeah. A lot of it is, I think, when you're dealing with, I'm not making excuses, but it's been my experience that dealing with some of the bigger platforms, you don't get a person, it's all automated when you get to a certain level. So just getting through the accounting, accounts payable, receivable piece of it, they like to, it's submitted this way, it's got to be that way. There's no real consistency from big company to big company with their platforms and how they want these things submitted. So we find ourselves spending.
Yeah, but you also cannot be a manufacturer and the bank at the same time. That is not your business to, as we call in the business, hold the paper and wait 45 days. So you're going to have those discussions, because that can put you out of business, unfortunately. So you will have to have that, and you may not have, listen, all money is not good money. And I think that you may have to have that discussion. I think you also need, desperately, is to educate yourself on B2C, because B2C, as whether it's your crowdfunding campaign or whatever those were, you can obviously take pre-orders on these things, and your margins are much bigger. Now, it's easier said than done, but I like to say I want to be one step away from the money. When I was prior to being on Shark Tank and prior to social media out there, I was just like you. I would make a product, hopefully the store buys it. Hopefully the kid that's busy on, Instagram or looking for his college application brings it out of the back and puts it on a rack. Hopefully, a person goes by and they like it on the rack and they pick it up. Hopefully there's not a long line at the register, or somebody not even at the register, and they don't just put it down and say, I'll come back to it. And hopefully they take it home and they like it. And if they don't, they return it. And now I got, the store asking me to take back goods. And I'm making much less instead of selling it directly to a customer, and being able to make this thing at $29 and sell it for $120. You get the money, right there, and know the customer, because after you know the customer, then you know how to upsell them and or say, how did you like it? Can I have a testimony? What more can we do for you? And you have now also ambassadors running around talking about your brand. You are directly talking to them, and you are making twice the amount of money. I would really highly suggest investing in understanding social media conversion and dealing directly with your customer. And that's the only way, because you need to be bringing in more cash, or you need to be retaining more cash. Well, good. So congratulations on everything. I think that you're off to a great start. 100% sell-throughs are so rare. I think you just have to touch up a couple of things, how you're getting the funding, meaning don't be the bank at the same time as the manufacturer. Express to people, your challenges. People are people, end of the day. If your brand and your product has already worked, at these companies, well, then you already have an in, and you can say, I just can't afford to do it this way. And I'd rather be that great story of how I have provided for you, and you are supporting two amazing women entrepreneurs. And I'm sure with your big organization, you can afford to just, give me the money, hopefully, as I deliver it or on time. You don't want to put me out of business. And then also learn how to keep learning how to talk directly to your customer, and be one step away from the money instead of 7.
Great advice. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.